The next effect we will look at is reverb. It's a very common effect. There are two different reverb plugins in Reaper. We're going to look at just one of them right now. So we're going to go ahead and add an effect, and this time we will look for the one called Reaverbate, not Reverb, but Reaverbate. Add, and this is what it looks like. Now I changed the sample back to arms mono because it's kind of a little easier to hear with this particular effect because it doesn't have any, it's completely dry. It doesn't have any with this particular sample, sorry, because it doesn't have any effects. So, okay, a couple things. Well, first of all, there's the wet and dry, which all of these effects will have. So the dry sound, that's basically the mix between the original dry sound, and the wet sound would be the effect, the sound coming out of the effect. So for instance, if I completely push this down, then all I would hear is the reverb sound. If I add more of this, then I hear both the original sound and that. In some cases, you want this to be all the way down. It depends on how you set the effects up. But right now, let's leave it like this, and then we'll play around with this a bit after. So these are the parameters that you have here, and these will change slightly depending on the type of reverb that you're using, and some reverbs are very complex. But this one has a room size and a kind of self-explanatory. The idea with reverb is that you can take a sound that was recorded, say, in a closet in a very dry space, so there's no resonance in the room, and you can create the illusion of it being recorded in a large space. So let's start with the settings as they are. Well, the first one we'll play around with is the room size. Okay, so here we go. Here's the sound. I'm gonna actually loop it so that you can hear it. I have it on toggle repeat so we can hear it over and over. Okay, here it goes. So first let's try it without any effect.
And it has arms. And it has arms.
Okay, let's turn it on.
And it has arms. And it has arms.
Okay.
And it has arms.
And then as you increase the size,
And it has arms. And it has arms.
it'll sound like the room is bigger.
And it has arms. And it has arms. And it has arms.
Right, and at one point it becomes so if you exaggerate these parameters, they become pretty quickly kind of artificial. But sometimes that's the effect that you want. So it's not always bad for it to sound artificial, but usually you want it to be more of a natural kind of a sound. So that's the room size is pretty self-explanatory. The smaller the room, the less resonance there will be. The dampening, that has to do, like if you can imagine a room, for instance, a room may be very large, but not be very live. And by live, we mean where there's a lot of surfaces that bounce the sound back and forth. So for instance, if you have curtains down, that room is going to be less live because it absorbs sound more. So that's what you control using this. So it's going to be a little bit more subtle. So let's try, see, keep it here.
And it has arms. And it has arms. And it has arms.
As opposed to.
And it has arms. And it has arms. And it has arms. And it has arms.
So it's somewhat subtle.
And it has arms. And it has arms. And it has arms. And it has arms.
It doesn't make so much difference.
It has arms.
Yeah, so this won't affect the sound as much. And okay, stop at the stereo width. That has to do with how you can think of the image of the sound, if you think of it that way. If it's full stereo, that means you'll get sounds coming out of the left and the right the way that you would in like in an actual room. It's more realistic. Whereas if you make it narrow, it's a little more focused, coming out of just one direction.
And it has arms.
So that's what that controls.
And it has arms. And it has arms. And it has arms.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be more realistic on with a wider image for sure. And the initial delay is kind of what it sounds like. You can have sort of a little bit of a delay right at the beginning of the sound. So right now it's at 0. And if we add some, let's say this much, right, it's got a little bit more of an echo right at the very beginning. Yeah, so this depends on the kind of effect that you're going for. If you've heard this kind of echo before, maybe in a space outdoors with a lot of where maybe you have somebody using a microphone and then the speakers are pointed towards a wall, and then you hear someone talking and you hear a reflection of the sound constantly. So if you want that sort of effect, that's how you do that. And then low pass and high pass is basically a very basic EQ. It's not going to be as sophisticated as the other EQ that we looked at, but it gives you some basic control there, so you can change that, you know.
And it has arms. And it has arms.
So if you want the sound, if it's too bright, you can make it a little bit darker this way, and if it's too dark,
And it has arms.
then you can focus it a little bit
And
more,
it has arms.
you know, so you could do
And
it.
it has arms.
So now again,
And it has arms.
actually this is a good opportunity to show the difference between wet and dry. So you hear the original sound, and you also hear this echo that's kind of muffled in a way,
And it has arms.
right?
And it has arms.
And now the combination of the way that you handle these two levels is this will basically affect the balance of one versus the other. So if I increase the wetness and I reduce the dry sound, now we hear a lot more of the delayed effect. And if I do it the other way around,
And it has arms. And it has arms.
now I almost don't hear any of that. So you can kind of mix and match, mix
and it
the
has
two.
arms. And it has arms.
Yeah, so it's a simple reverb, but it has a lot of the things that you might expect to find in a reverb. So it'll be very good practice to use this. You can also have presets, just like with the EQ, and you can try different ones, kind of depending on what you're doing. Some of these have funny names, so you kind of have to try them out and see what they sound like. And so that's kind of all there is to that, actually. All right, well, have fun playing around with this.